Wow, this is quite a crowd. I see people from all over the place, which is very exciting. We're here to talk about endpoint management, some changes in the environment that we have to deal with. I'm here with my friend Danny Ferry, and we're going to hopefully have a very exciting conversation for the next hour and show you some stuff, introduce some topics. But as I mentioned, my name is Kevin Sullivan. I've been doing this a very long time. I have been in the industry for the better part of 30 years, focused on endpoint management almost exclusively. I spent most of my career at Microsoft and was lucky, blessed to have been through the entire Intune journey. I left the company about 9 months ago and started doing some other interesting work. But I really believe this statement is true. The best product strategies are those ones that allow you to explore technical depth, leveraging deep technologies, but doing it in a way that's impacting your business in a positive way. So, Danny, you want to give a quick intro?
Yeah, hello. This is Danny Ferry. I come from British Columbia, Vancouver. That's where I'm at today. And likewise with myself, I've been in the industry for about 20 to 30 years. 20 years mostly focusing on identity and access management and group policy lifecycle management. And I've worked in very large scale enterprise as well as smaller scale enterprises. So I'm excited to present what we have here today for you.
Yeah, this is a good time. There's so much going on at Microsoft. There's so much going on at Microsoft security. There's so much going on in endpoint management. It's a really good time to take a moment and step back and think about how these technologies impact our day to day. So we're really here because of this moment where advanced group policy management is going away. Before I joined Microsoft in 2006, I was part of a small company called Desktop Standard, where we built a product called GPO Vault. That product is advanced group policy management. So Microsoft acquired the company, integrated the products, but now 20 years later, it's going to end of life. Sadly, it's not quite 20 years. I think the acquisition happened in September, and this is ending in April. I think April 14th, if I remember correctly, but check my notes. But that moment is important, but it also allows us to step back and say, oh, I'm a large organization or I'm a complex IT shop. What are the different issues that I deal with? When I'm starting to explore the cloud and I'm moving my endpoints to management from Intune, what are the differences between GP and Intune? Are there settings differences? Are there inconsistencies I have to be concerned with? And what conflicts could arise? We know that any conflict or misconfiguration could create an issue for me. It's complex. There's a lot of stuff going on. We need to be aware. We need to take a moment and be planful. But yeah, that's where we are today with configuration. That's why we're here to discuss this stuff. Any
Yeah,
thoughts?
really. Hey, Kevin, sorry to interrupt. But also some of the things to take in consideration is that if you are an AGPM user and now AGPM is going away, what's next? What are some of the considerations that we have to keep in mind? So some of the things to think about is how are you going to handle endpoint management configuration lifecycle for on-premise as well as those in the cloud? And how are you going to clean up and enable a smooth migration from AGPM while also supporting Intune and Entra ID? So these are some of the things that that organizations are going to have to start thinking about as they move off of AGPM.
Yeah, and the specifics are important, especially when we think about these technologies we've worked with for years. But we live in a world where things are changing rapidly. We just had a conversation earlier about AI. To me, that is such an incredible game changer. It's such a big focus of attention from the Microsoft shop, especially across the Microsoft security business. How are we adopting it? What's it going to mean to me when I use Security Copilot in Intune and I explore configurations and settings? How does that change the way I work day to day? And there's, obviously some real sort of far out thinking there where people can imagine a day where when you walk into the office in the morning, you just turn on your computer and you say, hey, I think Microsoft is calling Copilot Myco these days. Hey, Myco, what's top of my list for Intune management today? Any conflicts I should be aware of? And just begin to interact. Game changer, right? These things are going to change. Not today, right? There's a journey and there's a lot of things that people have to consider, security implications. But this list, high business disruption, scattered teams, organizational silos, on-prem and cloud, there's a lot to keep us up at night that we should be aware of. Any of these sort of strike you, Danny, from a large enterprise perspective? Any of these items seem top of mind?
Yeah, exact. Some of the things that you mentioned hit the nail on the head. Scattered IT teams. When speaking with large organizations, this is a big thing for them. They've established a process when it comes to AGPM, and now they've got to move that process over to another product. Some other companies that we deal with, they might have a small IT team, and so they were just using AGPM as something to audit that they're actually making the changes in and out, and that there's like one or two people reviewing the changes. It's almost like a peer review. So how do you move from that to a new product that has to deal with AGP group policies and Intune profiles?
Yeah, and we haven't even spoken about config manager, right? There's a lot of organizations that have deep change management processes that they've developed over years. One of the challenges with Intune, I have device configurations for my whole enterprise, for mobile and Windows and maybe not servers, but I have these capabilities, but I don't really have that refined change management technology that AGPM provided me. So as we think about continuing to manage my GPOs and Intune profiles at the same time, we have some obvious challenges. We have limited governance. I need to be able to see what's being changed, when it's being changed, who's changing it, all of these important things. I need to ensure that if I'm still managing a setting in group policy, if that setting can be managed or is maybe managed differently in Intune, am I creating an inconsistent experience? Do I have visibility into those types of conflicts? And I don't want to get into a situation where either IT or the end users are having negative impacts from a productivity perspective. And it's interesting, being I'll say experienced instead of old. You have this situation where we've been saying we're balancing security and productivity for many, many, many years. It really couldn't be more true today, right? We have to drive our organizations to think with a zero trust mindset. We need to ensure that our end users are able to be productive, but we don't give them an opportunity to sort of either open the door to nefarious folks getting into our environments or make mistakes that might create security vulnerabilities. GPO could be used as an attack vector, right? We think about it. Group policy is it's the holidays, right? Group policy is FedEx, it's DHL, it's UPS, right? It's just taking a package from one point and moving it somewhere else. What if that package, what's inside that package? Is it some bad config? Is it some nefarious goo or whatever? I have no idea what Amazon has dropped off at my house for the past couple of days, but that's in the conversation for another day. But be worried about that, or not worried, but be aware, right? Zero trust isn't necessarily about worry, it's about awareness. Do I live in a world where I think least privilege? Do I assume breach? Do I have this mantra that I want to get in my head. If you haven't done it, go to Microsoft and look at some of the work they're doing around zero trust workshops and tools that allow you to sort of do a deep analysis of your environment. They're super interesting. The team that put them together, brilliant folks, and they've been working hard on it. And then, of course, that I used to have that was easy button, that easy button on my desk.
I had one of those too.
what what happens if something goes south, or as some people say, pear-shaped? What do I do? How do I recover? How do I get back to a baseline? So I need to be aware of all these challenges. I need to make sure that I'm focused on the right things. And that means, and this, interestingly enough, is a mantra that we had been saying at Microsoft for years. It's time to modernize. The cloud, when Steve Ballmer started screaming about it, 20 plus years ago, it was crazy. But now it's real. Is it reliable? Can I ensure that the cloud is providing me reliability in a hybrid environment? Is it secure? Do I understand potential security vulnerabilities? Can I do the time? Can I take the time to make sure I'm understanding what is happening, when, where, why, and how, and who? And then most organizations have either externally motivated regulatory needs, or they have internal regulatory needs, or you simply just want to stay aligned with your administrative intent. All of those fall under governance and compliance, right? I need to ensure I know what's there and can react to changes, in appropriate time frame. And then we just want to be consistent. I want to come in on Monday morning and have a clear path of what I need to get done, and not have these crazy disruptions and what have you. Any thoughts on modernizing it from your perspective, Danny?
Yeah, you mentioned quite a bit of great points. When I think of consistencies, especially for larger organizations, a lot of these organizations have become more siloed. Like, as group policy has kind of split off into Intune, a common scenario is that you have a server team that handle their own GPOs. You have a on-prem desktop team that handle their GPOs. And now with Intune, you have an Intune team that handle the Intune profiles and their endpoints. And so with these larger organizations, what the challenge they're having is having a consistent process and policy, like not GPO policy, but policy within the organization on how to make changes to these three different types of policies, right? Server policies, GPO like endpoint use on-prem policies, as well as Intune policies. They present these to change management, and they might have different ways of doing things, right? So consistency, not only in the tech policies like group policies and Intune policies, but also consistencies in processes throughout the life cycle of these various policies.
Yeah, and it's funny how my brain works sometimes, but one of the things that popped into my head is when you work in these environments that have multiple silos, multiple administrative silos, ensuring there's good communication and awareness and transparency across those teams is so important. The funny thing that popped into my head was me communicating with my 13-year-old son. Like, we can disagree and he'll like head off into his room and say, yeah, see you, Dad. Instead of saying, hey, dude, this is what I'm trying to accomplish. I want you to be aware of what my goal is here. And he can in turn say to me, hey, this is why I don't think that's going to work, because you're an old idiot, boomer. And, but, so that communication across these teams is going to help you be successful, right? It's going to help your organization. Right. All right. Great setup. Appreciate it. We're going to pop up a poll here. So please take the time to check out or to give us some feedback. This would be really helpful. This is a moment. Advanced Group Policy Management ends of life April 14th. This is your moment to not just say, oh, I've got to get rid of that. or, oh, that doesn't mean much to me, or oh, it's a time to step back, look at my environment, take some time to modernize, be planful, be thoughtful about your changes, and not just take it as one of the many moments where things get deprecated or end of life. Um, this is a real good moment to help you propel your organization forward. Whether you've moved to the cloud, are moving to the cloud, are considering moving to the cloud, there's something inevitable about that. What a great time to look at your on-prem endpoint management environment and think about how that's going to change and morph as we move to a modern environment. So let's see if I can still move through the slides. All right, we've got this great. I'm going to let Danny sort of go through this. It's not really a timeline. It's more of a life cycle. But there are components to this that I think are worth considering. So real quick, Danny, you want to give a high level of what this sort of timeline means to us at SDM Software?
Yeah, for sure. So, when we think about modernizing group policies, what are kind of some of the steps that are involved, or the different buckets that are involved in trying to modernize group policy? So, we have here on the left, clean up, optimize, and migrate. So we need to find out or figure out, are the policies that I have, are they efficient? Are they clean? Or do we have duplication? Do we have policies that conflict with each other? Do we have single setting policies in the environment? And so trying to identify that, so that we can clean it up, optimize, and then migrate it to Intune, or even migrate it so that we can consolidate these policies, is very essential. And SDM has brought a few products that help tackle that challenge. We have GPO Migrator as well as GPO Reporting Pack, and these are awesome products that assist with that. Then we move over to managing change. So, we've done this cleanup. We've identified that there was a bunch of GPO sprawl. We've done this cleanup. And now how do we ensure that that doesn't continue? So we have organizations that we speak to that will say, I'm just focused on cleaning up I have like 1,000, 2,000 GPOs. I need to clean up and consolidate. But they're not thinking of, what about, ensuring that this doesn't happen again. Otherwise, you're always in that cycle of cleaning up and consolidating. So change management, or change manager for Group Policy and Intune, is an awesome tool. It's web-based UI, and it does help you to bring that under control. Right? You have your check-in, check-out, approvers, reviewers, and so forth. And that process is the same, or is familiar, whether you're tackling GPOs, linking of GPOs, or also modifying Intune profiles. Then we move over to audit and certify. You're thinking, well, if I have change management that's already has some sort of auditing, why is auditing as on a separate, on its own category? Well, because most products, managing change management products, they will audit what they do. But what happens if someone is using a different product like PowerShell or GPMC? They've taken control of domain admin, and they go ahead and make an out of band change. Change Manager will tell you if there was an out of band change. But because it was done outside of Change Manager, who did it and what domain controller it was done on, it's not going to give you that visibility. And so that's why auditing is very important as well, so that you have a complete view of your environment. Anybody who's making changes outside of the product as well as inside of the product, we're going to be able to be aware of. And then validating compliance. So, a lot of the work, these three buckets that we have before, is done on the group policy perspective. What's in my group policy? Is it secure? So forth. But when it comes to how do I ensure that the policy that I linked is actually getting to my computer? How do you make sure that, like, you could run an RSOP on individual computers, but how do you do that when you have 60, 70, 100,000 computers in the environment? We have some customers that have 250,000 computers. So how can you, at any point of time, validate that what's getting onto your endpoints, whether they're behind a VPN or in the office, is actually getting what GPOs are actually being linked?
Yeah,
And for
I
that,
mean,
we have Group Policy Compliance Manager. Yeah.
it is so important, and it's for those of you who have spent time troubleshooting RSOP, that last bit that Danny just talked about is probably really obvious to you, right? It's not fun. The tools
Mhm.
are lacking. Your networks are complex. You've got to like jump through hoops to figure out how am I running RSOP? Who am I running it as? What's the that's being able to consolidate that insight is important. But I want to take a bit. We're going to walk through each one of these steps, but I want to step away from SDM for just a moment because SDM doesn't exist because they're creating a problem. Your reality exists whether you have vendors that are supporting you to solve these challenges or not, right? So, why do I clean up? And this is an old, tired story, but I lived it. I'm one of the many people who did. Microsoft kindly in 2010 offered to move me back home to Massachusetts. I was working out of the Cambridge office for a bit. Um, and they were great. They sent a truck in, they packed up my whole house, they moved it into storage. It took me 9 months to find a house. I bought my house. They moved it out of storage. A few months later, I'm still going through boxes. And I open up a box with a full garbage can, like a full trash can from the kitchen that they just packed up and moved. Let's not move garbage, right? And Danny brought it up, and I couldn't empathize more. If I have an organization that has thousands of GPOs, and they exist, if you're not one of them, don't shake your head. They happen. We talk to these folks often. What's in those GPOs? What are the settings? Who authored those settings? Why did they author those settings? Why do they exist? No one knows, right? So this is the moment to take the time to do that inventory and assessment. Really,
Kevin, when I moved 2 years ago, how I unpacked the boxes, that's how they remained. I
that's
was
right.
so I was in such a rush to unpack those boxes that they stayed that way. And it's been 2 years, and I can see what you're saying. Yeah, that happens in the organization as well.
Absolutely. So if I move that configuration from, let's call it what it is, legacy technology to a modern state, or I'm still managing that legacy technology, I need to understand what is there. Everything there has an impact on my environment. I've done migration projects with organizations that we go through and look at some settings and some settings that were only relevant for Windows Vista. How many of you still have Vista in your network? Why did those settings exist? Can we get rid of them? All right. So inventory and assessment, that's a moment, that's a time. You're going to get some results, and then you're going to take those results so that you can optimize your environment and prepare to deploy. Get rid of your outdated stuff and your duplicates and what have you. And then if it's your time, let's migrate to, let's migrate to Intune. I'm going to Danny, if you want to look at questions on the fly, that's great, but I'm going to just continue going through this
Yeah, go ahead.
discussion. I love, love, love Intune. Most of the last 8, 9 years of my life was focused on Intune. Even more than that, although I did take a break in the middle to go back to core GP stuff. But what it has turned into over many years, right? Intune is not new. We started with an Excel spreadsheet full of scenarios back in 2008-ish. But right now, you're your baselines, your device configurations, your autopilot, your Android and iOS capabilities, there's so much rich stuff in there to give you the tools you need to manage your enterprise, but it's not everything. So if I'm ready to go, I need to do some consideration, and I want to clean up my source so that my target gets clean, and then I can maintain that clean target. Let's see, what am I moving on to next? So clean up and optimize, manage change. My next step for managing change is really about setting up my roles, who's responsible for what, where do my accountabilities lie? Do I have a change control process, not only to ensure errors don't slip through, but make sure we have the knowledge and the transparency necessary to keep doing better. Like every day, can I learn from what happened yesterday? And also, do I have the knowledge stored somewhere? If I have an issue, do I have the data to do a good, deep forensic analysis? And who can do that? So the role-based stuff is so critical. And it's actually very interesting how it's been implemented at SDM. But when I'm managing change, we have one organization that I'm working with right now. I love the way these folks think, but they're really focused on, let's deal with our security stuff first. The stuff that our external auditors care about, that's my top priority. And then other bits of configurations that are important, they're next in line. And I love that priority, right? Security is sort of this overlay that keeps us really focused. We're going to limit outages. Some of them might be our responsibility for our on-prem resources. Some of them, unfortunately, are going to be by our service providers. Thankfully, they're few, but they happen. And we strive for 5 nines, but we know how that works. And then lastly, that ultimate balance. Do my end users? It's funny. I have a older daughter who's 25 and just starting her career in technology. She's a software developer. And many of her friends work for companies that are managed by Intune. If they don't know that, that's a win, right? If those end users just get their work done and they don't see the details of the technologies that are managing them or keeping them secure, keeping them productive, that's great. It should be invisible. I did notice that someone had a hand up. Should I address that now or move on to any thoughts?
It's been answered.
Great.
Yeah,
Perfect.
I think it's been answered. Yeah, the questions were answered.
Perfect. Now we move on to auditing and certification, and all of the stuff that Danny talked about of how SDM addresses these issues, we put on these slides, right? When you're cleaning up and optimizing, you've got a reporting pack, a very rich reporting environment and a migration tool. Managing change, this is the core AGPM thing, right? This is what AGPM, previously GPO Vault, has provided for a long time. The change manager for Group Policy and Intune is a brilliant product that not only took some of those core scenarios that AGPM was good at, but catapulted them into the future and really enhanced them. And of course, this auditing and attestation bit not only provides the visibility. I love the auditing part. Who did what? When did they do it? How did they, whatever, what was the setting changes? But the attestation. Hey, Danny, this configuration that you've had in place for a couple of years, could you take a look at it? Is it still valid? Do we still need that? Does it need to be tweaked? We want to make sure we future-proof, right? We don't let junk or cruft build up, right? Take that moment to take a look at it.
Yeah, what I like about the certified portion is that you can identify owners of GPOs and put the responsibility on them to review their own GPOs. So you have security-based GPOs, give that to a security engineer. You have desktop or server-based GPOs, give that to their team so that they can validate that whatever is set from a corporate standard is actually getting that, or has it even changed? you have CIS baselines and Microsoft security best practices and baselines that come out on a regular basis. How does that match to what my corporation is saying should be there, and does it need to be updated? And that regular review, that certification that you do once a year, once every 6 months, whatever, you can then give that to your auditors and say, hey, listen, we are doing our best to ensure that our environment is clean and secure. So if something does happen, like it has happened, we've all been experienced that, where there was a security breach or something, you now have proof to show your auditors that you have been reviewing these GPOs on a regular basis.
Yeah, it's really such an important thing to put into your workflow, like your process. And different companies do it with different levels of fidelity. So I love this piece. Next piece, of course, is validating compliance. And in the spirit of tell them what you're going to tell them what you told them, we talk about compliance a lot. But let's go over it again. It's not just some third-party auditor comes in to hold you accountable to a regulation, although that's really important. It could be you have your own internal intent, and you want to ensure that that intent is reflected on the endpoints. And you've taken the time, and your brilliant, folks in the CISO office or whatever have taken the time to create these rules of engagement. And are you taking the time to validate that they're effective? Right? Just because there's a doc out there somewhere doesn't mean that has been reflected on the endpoints. And that's a critical component of this whole process. It could be daily, it could be dashboards, it could be whatever. But at the end of the day, it's data that's available to you that creates a transparent environment so that you can highlight things that may have gone a little pear-shaped.
Kevin, I was going to just mention, the Group Policy Compliance Manager has this one awesome feature. It allows you to compare. Let's say you had a baseline, a GPO baseline, and you had a bunch of settings. So it's not linked to any GPO, but you want to know if the settings in that baseline have been applied to your endpoints. And if it has been applied, which GPO is giving you those settings, right? And so that way you can say,
right
hey,
there,
you know what?
you can get right to the source.
Yeah, you get it right from the source, and you get to see if those GPOs are actually being applied. And if so, are they the same as what is in the baseline? And if not, what GPO do I need to update?
Right. Yeah. It's an ongoing thing. That's why at the beginning we had the timeline. It's really a bit of a cycle, right? You're constantly doing these evaluations and doing this analysis. Danny brought up something else that I thought was interesting. If you haven't taken the time to look at some of the resources that CSS provides you, you should go look. Like this is an organization that builds these incredibly deep documents about individual settings that could be used to harden your systems. There's a lot of data, like a lot of data. I think the GP one, before they started adding some Intune content, was probably 1,300 pages of just registry settings, right? It was a lot. Thankfully, we have Gemini and Copilot and ChatGPT and whatever that you can pull up this PDF and say, hey, could you give me an analysis of this and get some good deep summaries. But if you haven't looked at CIS or you haven't looked at the Microsoft security baselines, you haven't built your own baselines, I think it's a good time to consider that. All right, so Danny's going to share a bit of a success story, but we've been working with organizations, for years at different states. AGPM is going away. It shouldn't scare you. You're going to be able to be successful here if you rely on that solution. And here's an example of one.
Yeah, really, this is a very common scenario. But just speaking about, what we've done recently, there's a customer that we have. Their infrastructure is about 75,000 endpoints plus. They have about 70,000 Active Directory users, 1,000 policies to migrate, and their internal IT teams go, are about 30, right? And they're distributed. It's a distributed model. So what are some of the things that they did in order to migrate from AGPM? Well, you know what they did that I thought was really interesting is they didn't wait to the last minute when AGPM goes away. They started early enough. So they started with assessing and planning, targeting OUs and GPOs for a phased approach. So they identify first a couple of OUs and GPOs that they can, almost like a pilot, migrate over, see how things work with Change Manager, and make sure that that role delegation is in place as well, and it goes according to their corporate standards. Then, they go ahead and do the installation of Change Manager, and then carry those roles and map those roles out over to Change Manager. Then they do the customization and onboarding. Are there any other things that they want to do now that they're moving into a new product? Do they want to organize, for example, how they delegate linking of GPOs, or how they delegate creating of GPOs? So it depends on your ITSM model in your environment, your support model. And then once that's done, you onboard the rest of the GPOs, and then you then bring the AGPM migration, use the utility that comes with Change Manager to actually migrate the history and backups to Change Manager. And that's an awesome feature of a Change Manager, because, like, let's say you've migrated over to AGPM, or from AGPM to Change Manager, and a month later or a couple of weeks later you need to roll back to the previous version, but you're off of AGPM. So what happens? So by being able to migrate the history and backups, you can actually roll back to an AGPM version of that backup. And then again, they do that greater IT team training.
Yeah, when your architects take the product and do the evaluation, do the POC, roll it out, and whatever, they're hopefully documenting along the way the processes, the procedures that they want to implement, and then they go out to their extended IT organization. The number of times that we work with an organization that says, oh, when we roll out a new site, that site has their own IT shop that has full responsibility over blah, right? So how do I train them to make sure that everything's aligned? Or M&A, or you acquire a company, or whatever. It's great, and so many success stories here. We do want to take a moment to, and some great questions coming in, by the way. Thank you very much. Keep them coming. I do want to take a bit of a moment to show you the product. Let's walk through it real quick if we can.
I'd like to share how SDM software can help organizations in achieving effective and reliable change management when it comes to GPOs and Intune profiles. Change Manager for Group Policy and Intune profiles provides a modern approach for ensuring that only approved changes happen within your Group Policy and Intune environments. It provides a strong defense against unwanted or unexpected changes compromising environmental security. And it does give you a single console for on-prem hybrid environments, as well as Intune profile management. And we also added a built-in utility to migrate history and backups from AGPM to CMGPI. When you first log into the web UI, you're presented with a dashboard. Here you can quickly identify the status of your GPO management environment. Change Manager helps strengthen the security and governance by letting administrators assign specific roles, such as product administrator, break glass, GPO creator, auditor, and approver. And in version 1.9, we've added the ability to optionally enable the deployer role for third level of review to provide even greater oversight and control. Some roles are assigned globally, and other roles, such as approver and editor roles, as well as deployer roles, are assigned on a per object basis for GPOs, Intune profiles, AD containers, as well as administrative containers. The new restricted settings feature gives you precise control over which policy areas within a GPO can be edited by a GPO editor. For example, you can prevent an editor from changing security settings in a GPO while still allowing them to configure other policy areas, ensuring greater control and protection over sensitive configuration. CMGPI also keeps track of all changes done within the product, as seen in the menu option entitled Audit Log. The settings menu allows you to configure default approvers, require comments at object check-in, and also be able to enforce naming conventions using regular expressions. So for example, if I enable a specific expression here, I can verify that it works, save it, and now that is my new GPO naming rule. Under the Alerting Settings tab, you can configure a default email or distribution list for system alerts. You can also configure a Teams connection setting so that you can be notified via Teams on different actions, approve, check-in, check-out, and so forth. Now let's log in as an editor. As an editor, you have a set of objects associated with you. You can check out, edit, and perform change control operations on these objects without affecting the production version. You can view differences between current and prior versions, history of changes, and more. Another key difference between AGPM and Change Manager is that Change Manager allows you to manage containers, such as organizational units. You can link additional GPOs, enable or delete links, and control block inheritance. You can also roll back a change. So in this case, I have deleted a GPO and I want to go back to the previous version. So I'm going to roll back the change, approve the change, and deploy the change. Now, I wanted to show you how the same change control process applies to Intune profiles. You can edit settings, assignments, and scope tags. You're alerted of out-of-band changes with Intune. You can also roll back unwanted changes to Intune profiles, something that's not available natively with Intune. So if we wanted to make a change to, let's say, this Intune profile, we'll check out the profile, edit the settings. It takes you to the admin center. And here you can make a change. I'm going to enable Windows Health Monitoring, review, save. Once done, simply close the window, check in, enter the ticket number. We can see we're already alerted that there was a check-in and it's waiting for approval. I'm just going to simply approve this and then deploy the change. You also have the option to schedule the deployment to a different date as well. And the deployment is done. Now, CMGPI comes with an awesome feature called Global Settings Search. Basically, it allows you to search for a path or a value that can be located within any GPO or Intune profile. So if I want to look for something with the word password in it, it will go and search the environment and it'll tell you which GPOs contain that, that term password. You can then select the one that you want and you can simply select more details. It will take you to that GPO and you can either make changes to it or review the more settings. And it's the same thing with Intune profiles. You can select, I'm going to use the same password, and it finds the Intune profile that contains the term password in either the path or the value. So let's now briefly walk through what an AGPM import would look like. We've provided a command line utility called maintenance tool that we'll use for importing AGPM GPO history and backups into Change Manager for Group Policy and Intune. So I have the syntax here. I'm going to simply just press enter. It's going to look at the archive for AGPM, import it, and restart the CMGPI service. And so it looks like it started. Now we can log into CMGPI and take a look at what was imported. Okay, so let's look at to see which GPOs exist in AGPM. And so I go to my change control in AGPM, and you can see that there's a list of different GPOs. I'm going to focus on this one here, Cuprum AD AGPM controlled GPO. And let's take a look at the version difference here. So we can see the change that was done. First of all, if we go into the audit log, we can see here that this check-in was done by AGPM, checked in, and the comment was updated security policy, and that was the version 2.8. And that was done in AGPM. So now if I go to my objects and I go to that GPO, which is the Cuprum AGPM controlled GPO. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to check this out, and I'm going to make a change. And then what I'll do is I'll roll back the change to the AGPM version that was checked in. So let's just make a change here. We'll edit. I'm going to make a change to the account lockout policy here that we made in AGPM. So I'm going to just not define this, and because it really shouldn't be in this GPO. So now I've removed it, and now I go back to the group policy, and I can check it in. And what I'll do is I'll put my ticket number. I will approve this change. And now I'll deploy the change, and I'll deploy immediately. So now if we go back into, if we go to GPMC and take a look at the settings natively, so we can see here security settings, account policies, account lockout policy, and it's not defined. So that change was undone from what was done in AGPM. And so we see that it's actually been done into production. So now let's say I wanted to roll back the version of this GPO back to the AGPM version. So we removed the account lockout policy. So let's go back to version 2.0, which would be the AGPM version. Now we're going to submit it. We will now approve the request, and we'll now deploy the change to production. So now if we go back into GPMC, we want to take a look at this natively, we can take a look at the same GPO. We'll edit it to take a look at the policy to make sure it was rolled back correctly. So we go to security settings, account policy, and lockout policy, and you can see that the restore of the backup that AGPM created has been completed successfully. And so now this has been rolled back to the version that was in AGPM.
So we've highlighted just a few features that can be found in Change Manager for Group Policy and Intune. There are so many more features that are available. I've listed just a few here. Support for SSO using Entra ID users and groups. We have a powerful PowerShell interface, which includes about 85 plus commandlets within the module. We have the ability to assign GPOs, containers, and Intune profiles to an administrative container to create a virtual container for delegation aligned to business or operational needs. And we also have the ability to restore deleted GPOs.
We've added support for installation on Windows Server 2025. Change Manager also supports SQL Server or Azure SQL. And as you noticed in our demo, we have the ability to define the severity and of a change ticket number in the check-in dialog. And then finally, Change Manager does come with high availability, so you can deploy Change Manager in a highly available environment.
I'm Kevin. This is Danny. I think we have some moments for some Q&A. Danny, do you have any that you'd like to address or cherry pick while we're here?
Yeah, so some of the questions that came up is, you know, with all things AI, how does it really affect configuration management? And this is one that was really a real cool answer. And the response here is, I think it's still to be determined. I do think that configuration of large numbers of endpoints and large numbers of settings are ripe for being enhanced by AI, either through improved reporting or improved troubleshooting. What are your thoughts on that, Kevin?
Yeah, I totally agree. I would take it to another level because there's the long-term impact of AI that's going to help me make a more refined, articulate endpoint management environment. But there's the day-to-day operational stuff that allows me, whether I'm using Security Copilot built into Intune or whether I'm using some other Gen AI, it allows me to look at something and give me insight. Hey, I need to enforce a setting that controls blah. I need to be more secure in this space. What can I do with group policy? What can I do with Intune, right? It can go out there and pull a lot of insights. And just to articulate and sort of react to all of the caveats that we see, it can be wrong. So use it as insight to help drive you, to help you go learn more. But I find it super efficient and built into the Intune console. If you're able to use Security Copilot, there's a lot of hoops to jump through to get there. But built in, if you're doing some authoring of a setting right in line, you can say, hey, what's this setting do? And get a real good, quick, comprehensive dump of that setting. And for those of you who are really deep on group policy, you know that the settings information is stored in these individual files for the most part, which includes explain text. With Intune, these are built into these different types of documents that drive the interface and drive the configuration of Windows. And they're things that you should be aware of. AI can really help because it's tedious to learn it all manually. And, you know, I'm not 25, I'm not 30. If I was and I had to learn, you know, all of this GP stuff, it would be overwhelming. So how can I make that simpler? So day to day, you have benefits to AI. Long term, I agree with Darren. It looks like this is a great environment for AI to get better. And then if you are a config as code shop, being able to build DevOps experiences that react, right? This panacea of what AI could bring to us is I can look at the environment, see what's happening, make adjustments, you know, all without a ton of human interaction, or the right checkpoints. Instead of saying, hey, Danny, could you go spend a week researching this setting? You could just say, hey, the system said that this setting should be of this value, and I spend a day or an hour thinking about that, right? I get focused. I think that's good.
Yeah, and one last question. We have another minute or two. This was a good one as well. Do you think group policy will be replaced by Intune eventually? You know, the answer here, it remains to be seen. Microsoft has moved at a glacier pace in covering things that people have been asking for in Intune. Server support is key miss right now as the capabilities provided by GP preferences. So, you know, like personally, as long as there's Active Directory, there will always be group policies. we've spoken with some organizations that have moved completely over to Intune because their model allows them to do that. But you have banks and insurance companies and federal government that might not allow you to do that completely. And so I think there will always be some group policies that will be still apply in the environment. What are your thoughts on that, Kevin?
Yeah, I have one thought that I think is important. I have one thought. Kevin never said that, by the way. I have lots of thoughts. But someone brought up configuration manager. So there's a lot of different environments that we have to consider. I just want to make this really clear. Microsoft never stated or had an effort to create Intune as parity to previous configuration management environments. So if your expectation is Intune will become config manager, that's not going to happen. There's always going to be differences like we've discussed. If your expectation is everything you do in GP, you're going to be able to do in Intune, it is not going to happen, likely not going to happen. There's always going to be differences. But Danny, you're spot on. As long as AD is there, GP is there. As long as your admins choose to manage on-prem, group policy is going to be a tool that you're going to continue to leverage and utilize, and you need to do it well. Right? And Intune is a reality. We're going to all see consumption continue to go up, but I don't think it's about replacement. I don't know that I would consider that the correct question.
Right. I agree with you.
I do see a future where on-prem management is really relegated to very specific, nuanced niche environments. Especially for the small and mid-sized organization, who needs a data center in their house, right?
Right.
Let's move to the cloud. But that's too simple a story. Anyway, I could talk about this stuff forever, and it feels like I have. It's been a long journey, but
that's
anyway.
great.
I thought this was great, Danny. Thank you for the discussion. Jillian, hopefully this resonated very well with the audience. I see some great questions, a lot of thank yous. Thanks everyone for joining.